I'm Dr. Richard Lewis Miller. I'm an 85-year-old clinical psychologist and a nationally certified firearm safety instructor with ID. I'm here today to talk to you about breathing as an important aspect of firearms training and shooting. We all know how to breathe because we breathe all the time. That's involuntary breathing. But there's another kind of breathing, voluntary controlled breathing. I'm going to tell you why it's so important. Picture your car, and picture in the back of your car, there's a gasoline tank, and there's a pipe that goes from the tank to the engine, and the little pump that pumps the gasoline to the engine. When we press our foot on the gas pedal, gas goes into the engine. Now, imagine what happens when you take your foot off the gas. The engine slows down and it'll stop if it doesn't get enough gasoline. Suppose you go down on the gas and come up and go down on the gas and go and come up. What will happen then? The engine will move faster and further, and then it'll back off and it'll keep going back and forth. The car will run the smoothest if you keep your foot at a steady angle and therefore maintain a steady amount of gasoline coming into the engine. Our bodies are the same way. We have two fuels. One fuel comes from food, and the other fuel comes from oxygen. The oxygen we breathe in goes into the lungs. Blood from the heart goes into the lungs, picks up the oxygen, goes back to the heart, and the heart pumps the oxygen to the entire system through the arteries and then into tiny tubes we call capillaries. Those capillaries deliver the oxygen that is our fuel. When we're shooting a firearm, we are breathing involuntarily, our normal breathing. However, certain things do happen during firearm use, meaning shooting, go bang. We often tighten up because we're nervous. If we're shooting competitively, we might be nervous, or with a class and other people are watching us, we might be nervous. And so we're liable to constrict our breathing. Remember what happens? Well, that's what happens when we start to constrict our breathing. You send a message to central computer, hey, not enough fuel coming in, and then the system goes on a bit of an alert. But what happens in an actual shooting situation? Adrenaline pumping like crazy. All of you have had an adrenaline rush. We call it an adrenaline rush. It happened. Let's say you have a near miss in an accident and that everything is pumping. That adrenal rush is why over 80% of the shots taken by police officers in the United States at a relatively short distance miss. Why? Because when adrenaline is pumping, it is very hard to keep the hands still. However, there is a way to keep the hands still, and that is through voluntary breathing, which is different than involuntary breathing we're doing all the time. Voluntary breathing is taking control of the abdomen and breathing in and out, breathing in and out, taking the time to breathe in and out in small breaths, not big breaths that are going to send us into a hyperventilation like, because that'll get us shaking even more. We need steady breaths, steady supply of the fuel. So before you shoot, if you have the chance, and in classes you do, at clubs you do, when you're doing target shooting, when you're hunting, you have time to take 30 seconds to quietly adjust your breathing so that you steady the fuel supply to the system, and then the system will not be shaking as you're shooting. Let me give you a dramatic example. Watch my finger now. I'm going to take a big breath. See, you notice how my finger went up with the breath in? That's not the kind of breath we want to take when we're trying to get a steady oxygen supply. We want very, very little breaths where the finger hardly moves. That's what you want. If you do that breathing before shooting, you will be shooting with a steady finger, a steady hand, a steady arm, and a steady body. And the name of the game in firearm shooting, as steady as we can possibly be. I hope you found this helpful. Until next time, this is Dr. Richard Lewis Miller reminding you that good health is also worth fighting for.